start mapping the non-mandatory field into the adverse events, select the drug programme and the study set that you want to add the mappings to. Go to Create Mappings, and as you can see in the summary table we can see adverse events because adverse events non-mandatory fields have already been populated. If the file that was loaded at the time of populating the mandatory field didn't contain all the data, this can easily be changed by selecting adverse events and clicking Edit Settings. This gives you the option to start change your file name path here. So you are then presented with the adverse event mappings table below so that you can start mapping the additional non-mandatory fields. It is advised to map one or two non-mandatory fields, load the data, troubleshoot any data, check the visualization until you really start feeling comfortable with the data setup and the mapping process. So if we now start populating the mandatory fields, non-mandatory fields, this will start building out the visualization in the A Hub for the adverse events view. So the AE subjects count plot, the AE overtime plot, the AE table, the AE summary and the chord diagram. In addition to this, the adverse event filters will also be populated to allow a user to mine the data. So if we start mapping the non-mandatory fields, I'm going to map all the non-mandatory fields all in one go. So here we have AE end date. So for this, we must select the aggregation function, which represents how the data is presented in the source data. So for mine, I have day first. So I will select data assembler day first. The next field we have is for whether or not the AE presented was serious. This is a text field, and the result will be a yes, no. The next one, reasonable possibility that the AE was caused by the investigational product. Again, this is text, yes, no. The next one is a mandatory field, which has already been populated. The next one is the AE number. Now this next one, which is starting severity grade. So this is the grade at which the AE started. And the next one now is AE severity grade changes. This one in particular is populated with all the source data columns which contain AE severity grade changes. The starting severity grade is not required in this field, and it does use the aggregation function multiple AE severity grade changes. Remember to separate out each source data column with a comma and a space. And here now we must select the aggregation function multiple AE severity grade changes. We now need to populate the AE severity change grade changes dates. This field is populated again with all the source data columns which contain dates for AE severity grade changes. The starting date is not required, and again the aggregation function multiple AE severity grade change must be used. And you must remember that when populating this data in your source data file, the dates must be represented in month, day, year. Again, separate by using a comma and a space. And here we select again multiple severity AE grade changes. This is a date, but here in the aggregation function, because we're populating it with a specific aggregation function which applies to adverse events, the requirement is that the source column data has been populated with the correct format, which is month, day and year. The next one has been populated because that was a mandatory. Next we have, if you have Medra version, then you can populate that. I don't actually have that in my file. The next one we have is Medra preferred term, which is a true mandatory field, so that's already been populated. Medra higher level term, Medra lower level term, and no aggregations required at these. Action taken. So this is the action that was taken for the drug. We don't have that populated here, but we do have later actions taken. So we have investigational drug name here. So this will be the column that represents the drug name. Additional drug names, if you have additional drugs, we don't have any. And then initial action taken for initial action taken for the investigational drug. So for that, we will have a column there. No aggregation is required there. Initial action taken for additional drugs. Again, if you have that populated in your source data column, then source data file, then populate it here. Action taken due to severity grade changes for investigational drugs. So for this one, we now need to populate, we need to collect all the source data for columns that contain the actions taken associated with the severity grade changes. The initial action is not required in this field, that's already been populated above. And we do need to use the aggregation function array for this particular field. And this you will see these grade actions taken in the event filter in VA Hub. So if we now populate action taken 1, comma space, action taken 2, comma space, action taken 3. We need to use the aggregation function array, and this will allow the columns to will allow React to collate the data from those 3 source data files. You can see here that this mapping is underlined, and that's indicating that there's an error somewhere between the mapping that you've put into admin UI and how that field is actually mapped in your source data file. So if I click on that, and you can see that it should have been AE_3. If I populate it with that, and now the error is corrected. So that's just something to look out for. The next one we have is action taken due to additional drugs. We don't have any. Causality for an investigational drug. Causality for IP. We then have causality for additional drugs. We don't have any. AE outcome. If you have any dose limiting toxicities in your file. the time point for those. If you have any immune related, if the adverse event was immune mediated, whether it was a cause of a reaction to the infusion, whether or not the AE actually required treatment, did it cause the subject to be withdrawn, and then if you have these other ones populated, if it was a suspected endpoint category, you can also populate those. You can see for most of the latter ones we had no aggregation function requirement. If we now move down, we confirm that those mappings are correct. It's already selected. So if we now click save. So the mappings that we have mapped the data fields to the source data field columns have saved successfully.